Back with another episode of Where in the World is our man Sam Diego Spiegelman. He is back in Texas after another trip out to Louisiana with a little, side trip to Alabama as well. We'll talk about what we saw this weekend. We're both at the same game Saturday, Edna Karr and St. Aug. A lot to unpack there. I had another couple of games in JFK and John Ehret on Thursday and Zach Renopoulos on Friday. So we'll kind of look at the weekend a little bit, including the big news off the field kind of Saturday morning of Jakeem Stewart's reclassification, and also kind of look back at the season thus far, the games we've had a chance to see in Louisiana and some of the guys that have stood out along the way. Sam, I didn't realize I'd get a Carmen Sandiego reference in here, but you've been traveling enough and added another state to the travels. So excited to have a little bit of your time on a Tuesday and to talk about all of it. What's up, man?
Doing great, man. My travels are winding down. I was just, not to go too behind the curtains, but I was on a call with my boss a little bit earlier today and was talking about my penultimate.
Too much money, rein it back in.
Yeah, you need to cut it out. Too many beautiful nights out at Canes for you in one weekend, sir. So I'm getting ready to hit the road, get back to Georgia, who's dealt with their own hurricane trauma this past couple of weeks. We know plenty about that. And then one last trip to Tennessee before the month is over. And then I'll be close to home and then gearing up for, December. That's when, we're first got to gear up for the early signing period, which is heating up as Halloween gets closer. And, just happy to be home, happy to unpack what was a really fun game on Saturday night. I had a really exciting group of games myself. And, just happy to be here on the Recruit That Boot.
There you go, man. When you travel, do you have anything that you're out there collecting? I feel like you've got most of the SEC covered so far this season alone. Are you collecting magnets or little mini helmets or anything? What you doing out there? How do we know where you've been when you get home and look at whatever the hell you have there where you can hide a collection?
Well, at this point, these are a lot of return visits, but I used to, when we were living in New Orleans and I would go to different places in Texas, I would bring Allison back some souvenirs. So she's got I'm going to butcher this. I think it's a chanquito, which is like a small wooden pig that I brought her from San Antonio from my first All-American Bowl back in the day when Devontae played in there. Devontae Smith for our listeners or viewers. I've gotten her shot glasses, but between the two of us, we have so many shot glasses. We look like alcoholics with how many. We've had to dispose of so many. But that's always what my family would bring me back. So. I kind of slowed down over the years. I brought her a bunch, sometimes, I brought her like shirts if I thought they were cool. When I was recruiting her to come move to Austin, there were little souvenirs here and there. But at this point, these are business trips. All I'm getting is coffee and I'm just trying to in, out, see as many kids as possible, enjoy myself on these Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays worth of high school games, do the work, and try to get a little bit of sleep in between, and then it's trains, planes, and automobiles.
Rapid fire reactions to all that. I have also had to thin out the shot glass collection that compiled over the course of the late teens and early 20s. Mm-hmm. You bring back clearly a really nice souvenir shirt this weekend from a New Orleans trip there. Suns.
Well, Allison has some incredible Louisiana versus all y'all gear. So she's gotten blessed in that capacity. Schools have given me sometimes 2 shirts, which I share. Aug, not unfortunately, Aug blessed to give me this. I was looking for the State of Football shirt, which as soon as we get another contact, I will be requesting my State of Football St. Aug shirt. But I appreciate all the gear because we get to represent these schools that let us cover their kids, and This is what it's all about, is getting to put these schools on notice so colleges know to go there.
Yeah, I'm not jealous at all that you're wearing that Aug shirt today,
You should be. It was intentional. My fashion was purposeful.
Also, while we're talking coffee, just a quick aside, pumpkin spice latte is maybe the worst coffee flavor of the year. Sorry. Anyway.
Of course not. If you're not getting a mocha latte or a vanilla latte or a regular latte, then I will see you latte later. Nailed it.
Awful. Awful. All right, we're 5 minutes in. Fortunately, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on Jakeem Stewart, the newly minted 2025 prospect in Louisiana. We had a chance to see him in the middle of Edna Karr's entrance on Saturday as they prepared to face his former team of about a month or so ago. But now official, he announced Saturday morning, Jakeem Stewart, 2025 prospect, something we'd been watching unfold now for quite a while. Just, I guess, reactions to that, and now the really abbreviated timeline for LSU and other programs to try and ultimately land him this December.
Yeah, he announced on Saturday he is now in the 2025 class. For rivals, he is the top defensive prospect in the country. And as I've went on the record on this podcast and on other platforms, I think it's going to be a really difficult decision at the end of the day. You see some sites have done this respectively, already moved him. He's not the top defensive prospect, but he was number one in 2026. But without a senior season, without really a junior season, he's going to go from St. Aug to college, play on Saturdays with 10 varsity games under his belt, which is he's dominated camps. He has incredible film. He looked as good as advertised, if not even his best form. And you saw it up close at his jamboree and his scrimmage. Looked like we were about to see the season that we were going to be talking about, maybe potentially for years to come. But he is just going to train until that decision is made, until he gets onto a college campus. And that recruitment now starts to heat up beginning this weekend. He'll be in Eugene for the big Ohio State-Oregon game, two of his top four contenders. We know that Oregon is very much akin on adding Jakeem Stewart to the fold and bolstering their defensive line group. And there's some Louisiana connections up there. And Dan Lanning has done a superb job getting Jakeem Stewart now on campus for about his third time, I believe, since April or May. After that, he's got official visits lined up again to Ohio State, which has often very connected with Jakeem Stewart. The connection between Larry Johnson, Baton Rouge native Alan Clark, other connections with not only Ryan Day, but Larry Johnson's record of producing first-round picks, number one overall picks at the position that Jakeem Stewart plays, off the edge or this hybrid defensive lineman. Whatever you want, Jakeem can do it. And then if it's about development, about him going in with 10 games of varsity experience under his belt, you have to look at someone like with LJ's resume as a very likely candidate that he could end up in Columbus. And he'll also get back to Baton Rouge for that LSU Alabama game that's already shaping up as expected to be one of the biggest recruiting weekends of the fall for those Tigers. And as again, we've said on this podcast, said on other platforms, at the end of the day, whether it's USC, which of course he will also get to for his OV, and saw USC and LSU square off at the end of August, right before this all went down. Whether it's USC, whether it's Oregon, or whether it's Ohio State, if he is leaning in any of those directions, I do think it'll ultimately be out of state school X versus LSU in the end. I don't think that any decision will be made without running it by Frank Wilson, who has been a central figure in Jakeem Stewart's recruitment since he was in the 8th grade. Obviously, the associate head coach at LSU and a St. Aug grad, a former coach at Edna Karr. There are a lot of factors in this. So whether, USC has momentum, Ohio State has had momentum. Whether one of those teams is trending with Jakeem or whether it's LSU by November, December, that's when we expect a decision to be made. And I think it'll ultimately be LSU and another team in the end.
Big recruiting weekend for LSU this weekend against Ole Miss, and then a big one, you mentioned Alabama, when Jakeem will be back in Baton Rouge in early November. Jakeem's big teammate, Big Rich Anderson, will be on campus for both of those, and chatting with him after that game Saturday night, he couldn't help but smile and laugh a little bit, saying, "Yeah, no, we're gonna get him. Just watch. Y'all just wait. Y'all gonna see." And talking about how good of a recruiter he feels like he is. There are 3 current LSU commits on the field for that Cougars team, with Rich, Aiden Hall, Teron Francis. And as we get into unpacking what we actually saw on the field that night, I thought all three of those guys had really strong games, despite Manchild battling some illness and things. I thought was still impressive in his performance. Toughed it out, played 4 quarters, was difficult for St. Aug to bring down on first contact in both the receiving game and as a returner. But we can kind of jump in, man. Rich, I thought was huge up front, and we can go through each one of them. How impressed were you with what you saw from those 3 Cougars?
Yeah, Big Rich was really impressive. Not only live in the game, I thought he completely shut down the inside run game for St. Aug, which has been obviously an anchor of that offense under Coach Bobby Valdez. He's going to run that RPO with his athletic quarterbacks that can run or pass, and Big Rich forced them to go through the air or at least try to attempt that outside zone, which they were the Cougars with their electric DBs and linebackers that are willing to tackle. You got the big 4 up front for Karr were eating. So Big Rich, really impressive. He's so strong. He's so athletic and bouncy for 6'3.5", 300 plus pounds. He's like
quick,
a bear,
man.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
quick like a bear. He's very powerful. He continues to ascend. That's so important with these interior defensive linemen, is to continue to grow. And what you're seeing with Rich, how he's taking advantage of that frame, of that power and that bounciness. You love to see that from an interior guy. And I know that the folks at LSU already thought he was one of the nation's best defensive tackles in 2026. They thought he was one of the best defensive tackles in 2025 if he had been in that class, for instance. Regardless of class, would have probably been an easier way to say that. Speaking of which, let's also compliment Corey Adams. I think it was hard to notice sometimes in the game, but going back and watching the tape from there, Corey Adams made a bunch of splash plays. He came close, a lot of pressures, near sacks. He continues to develop. He's got a really excellent first step, and he's long, he's strong, he's powerful, and he's played a lot of his time at Karr off the edge. He's working a lot inside next to Big Rich, and he's a mismatch when he works inside. He's so quick. He's lightning quick. So really great performance, I thought, by the Ole Miss commit. Aiden Hall, Agent Zero. I mean, Louisiana it might be a quarterback state for 2027. It's a safety state for 2026. Blaine Bradford and Aiden Hall have been 2 of the best safeties I've seen in action in the first half of the season. Aiden has a lot of the similar traits to Blaine, and I love that Karr uses him not on the back end of the defense. They let him play kind of freelance by the line of scrimmage. He is a fantastic tackler. He takes direct paths to the football. He saved the touchdown earlier in the game from a loose St. Aug receiver. He's dynamic. He's hard hitting, and he's also a short tackler. And what we saw at LSU camp over the summer, he just gets to the ball. He's just as quick against the pass. I love his versatility. And you mentioned Manchild being under the weather. He separated his shoulder 2 weeks earlier and did not play last week. So this was his first action back since separating his shoulder. As someone who has suffered that injury, I know how painful it is. He had a couple of catches, none bigger than that route down the seam. 2 St. Aug DBs are in Teron's face. His range, his catch radius, his ability to come down through contact, his ability to separate at 6'2" and 200 pounds. I love his physicality. He sometimes, can be a little bit inconsistent. I think that's something that, can only get better as he continues and eventually gets to LSU and gets under Coach Hankton's watch and continues. You love the glimpses you see from Teron Francis throughout his Ed Carr career.
A lot to love from all those guys. You mentioned the Aiden chase down tackle. That was a play to the opposite side of the field that he was well behind as he had to close on that receiver. And I mean, was great in everything that he was asked to do. Spent a lot of time up around the line of scrimmage, out on the edge. And so bringing some pressure in a couple spots, setting the edge in a couple spots, and just physical at every level, and the speed that he has from sideline to sideline, as well as to chase down that receiver. And as you mentioned, save that touchdown was really impressive. And I know we were both impressed as well with a couple of his teammates in that secondary who, when we look at other guys outside of the LSU commits that stood out, I think the corners, the 2026 corners, Hayton Howard Jr., Mo Williams Jr., Hayward has always been tall, long, speedy, and he's kind of filled out a little bit the last couple of years hitting the weight room. I feel like every couple of times that I see him, he updates me, Jared, I swear I'm 185 now or whatever he is at that point. Mo was always kind of an instinctive ball hawking guy as an underclassman, but was a little bit shorter, and seems like he's sprouted up to where he's 5'11" now, probably, maybe pushing even past that. But those two guys, both now with Power 4 offers and both looking really impressive in that 2026 class with Aiden.
No, that's a great point. I went up to our boy Josh Preston at one point, and I just, again, this Karr defensive line was eating. You know how much I love to watch big guys get after it, but I had to go over to Josh, and I'm like, "Do you see how big these corners are?" And they have their hands full with two of the best 2027 receivers in the state, and Miguel Whitley and Raekwon Williams at St. Aug. Both of those guys are dynamic, and they've been tearing up their sophomore seasons. And I thought Howard had an excellent day in coverage, a willing tackler, and the same for Mo. Mo, I think after one or two missed opportunities, he really bounced back, which is such an important trait for corners to be able to, have your moment. Even if you don't win, someone beats you on a route, that they're meant to win on offense. So for you to bounce back, I was really impressed by both. I got a chance to mention both of them in my takeaways from this weekend. That Karr secondary, they're all physical and willing tacklers, which is so rare to say about DBs. And I think you have to credit Coach Howard, the defensive coordinator there. He works so much with the DBs, and those guys are a big reason why that Karr defense has state championship aspirations.
Those two guys, obviously, I mentioned popping off some on the recruiting trail. Torrance Sanders, they call him Toe, another really good defensive back who played a little bit outside, also seemed like he worked inside to safety some. He was a versatile guy in that secondary for those Cougars on defense. Tyreek Bragalia and Arsenio Bolds Jr. at linebacker, both making plays. And so at every level, a lot to like from the Edna Karr defense. You mentioned the fantastic 2027 receivers, Miguel Whitley and Raekwon Williams, who we've kind of talked about a little bit here and there throughout this season. Flipping to the other side of things, I want to hear your takeaways from the dynamic Edna Karr receiver opposite Teron Francis in I started mixing up names from like three different schools. Dejon Smith, who I looked at this summer and thought he had a chance to be kind of a breakout player. He had two really explosive touchdowns in this one. Long plays that really changed the game in that second quarter. I think he's a guy that some of the schools around Louisiana really need to be taking a closer look at. How did you feel from your opportunity to watch him on Saturday night?
Yeah, what I learned pregame was that Dejon was a running back last year. So obviously, Edna Karr is a stout running game, but they had guys in front of him, and he wanted a chance to see the field. So he is new at receiver, and seeing him burst off those two long touchdowns, able to separate very easily. Like, let's be real, he was able to separate with that running back background. I love that the instant acceleration that he's able to get off the line, and obviously straight line speed down the field. And I love his run after catch ability, which we saw on a couple occasions on a little bit shorter routes that the Karr rollout passing game saw. He's used to breaking tackles and busting through blockers, so running after the catch comes natural to him. I think you're exactly right. I think he could play as high as Tulane. I know Tulane is recruiting at a really high clip, but I'd love to see a UL, or hey, can we also give a shout out to the Warhawks, the 4-1 ULM? They're literally the butt of the joke on this show all the time, but maybe ULM wants to take a look over there. Let's get Tony Hull on line too. Like,
is ULM the butt of jokes on this show?
Jarrett, you're being naive. Don't you read the comment section?
I don't know. They have not, compared to the other FBS programs in the state, they have not recruited Louisiana at anything close to the same level of their other FBS peers, or however you want to frame it, around the state. But the season they're having right now should be an opportunity, to your point, to build on. When you're 4-1 and doing things that I don't think this program has done in terms of success on the field as an FBS school. You'd have to go back to their FCS days when they were this successful. I think they've started to put at least the Sun Belt on notice, if not some more folks around the country who are realizing, wait, they just beat this James Madison team that we looked at as maybe a playoff contender and are sitting near the top of the conference. There's an opportunity now where more of these kids around Louisiana are hearing about the Warhawks to maybe, capitalize on that and have more of a local influx of talent.
Might be worth a trip for Louisiana versus all y'all to head back up north.
Yeah. That was a huge one this weekend at James Madison. While we were watching that high school game, I was kind of texting a friend from up there who had been talking a little bit of noise in my texts of we're not going to be on the same page tonight about this and whatnot. And then as I was wrapping up at Tad Gormley and I saw the score and the fact that the Warhawks had overcome that 10-0 deficit and come back and won, I just kind of sent eyeball emojis to take that shot back.
The rest of the country has officially been put on notice. The Warhawks are coming, and they won't be stopped. Let's get a John Gruden TikTok on this.
This is the part of the show where we just break into. We're each going to do 3 John Gruden TikTok style breakdowns of guys who have impressed us the first half of this high school season. And so I'm requesting that you start with Nate Shepard. No, but the way we are going to attack some of this look back at the season is we're going to focus on the games that we have had a chance to see guys in person. So it's obviously not going to cover all bases and say this is the top performing quarterback across Louisiana through 5 weeks, but let's kind of look position by position and talk about from the Louisiana games we've had a chance to see who has caught our attention. If you were giving kind of a personal Sam's eye catcher, Jarrett's eye catcher award type deal at the midway mark, let's start with quarterback Louisiana games. Who would you look at as your top quarterback performance you've had a chance to see in person?
We just saw it last week, Elijah Haven. We saw him in a tightly contested Thursday night game. We saw him operate inside the pocket, the way he maneuvers inside the pocket. We saw him operate outside the pocket, making off-platform, off-schedule throws, operate a short rollout passing game where he's going through his reads and having to make reads and make the throws to accordingly. And then we saw him take over the game in the second half, particularly in the fourth quarter, with a 65-yard run downfield. We know that he's a dual sport athlete. He looked like the best athlete on the field in that Dunham Ascension Catholic game. We talked about this with Arch Manning several years ago. If you're going to play at the 2A level and you're going to be a 5-star quarterback, you better look at when the game is on the line. And you can't ask for much more of what Elijah Haven, now the record holder in so many passing statistical categories that Dunham, has done in the first half of his sophomore season. He's someone that looked great as a freshman. Looks like he is taking a massive leap forward in his second year for the Dunham school, who's undefeated at this point. And would not be surprised if he continues to ascend down the line. Loved everything we've seen from him in person. That's a performance that just kind of left it rolling for me.
I'm not going to say that I'm going to go opposite you every time to kind of spotlight different kids, because a lot of the games you've been at, I've been at, and I've, weeks that you're out of state, I'm still bouncing around Louisiana. And so it is kind of an opportunity to spotlight a couple of other kids, but also, I mean, even just objectively, I think Vashon Coulon's game, he struggled a little bit this week against that great Karr defense. But when I saw him against Cecilia put on an absolute show with, I think it ended up being 4 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, and just distributing the ball all over the field, moving around the pocket. And to watch, they call him Tig, to watch the junior quarterback for St. Aug, his emergence from being forced in at times last year, when some older quarterbacks were banged up, to now feeling like some things are starting to slow down for him as a junior and that he's kind of the leader of that offense. I think his development has been really impressive and is a big part of why St. Aug has been as explosive as it's been for much of the year and will still be a factor deep into these playoffs, even, coming off of a tough loss Saturday. I think there's somebody to watch in that Division I select group for sure.
I love their long-term future. I love their short-term future. I think that they're they're in. We talked about this off air, but they're in that thick of that tier 2 in the Catholic League. Right at the bottom of tier 1. They're probably going to give Karr one of the biggest tests so far of their Catholic League slate, and there's someone that, because they're young, playing in that game in early October, now in a month, will now start playing in playoff games, and it's going to be a whole different season. And they're young, so they're going to learn they're young, they're talented, and they're learning on the fly, which sometimes lends itself to deep playoff runs, and that sets them up for the long term.
I'm going to ask you, as we look at the running backs, are we including, for me, jamboree and scrimmage stops? Or are we trying to stick to the regular season weeks 1 through 5?
I think in terms of running back, I think we can almost talk about. Let's just talk about the elephant in the room. Let's just hit it. You saw him. I watched the tape. Let's break him down. Let's get in our Gruden grinder of the week, Nate Shepherd, for 5 weeks running.
I saw Nate in the scrimmage, and I'll see him again this week in week 6. What's he got?
Nice.
20 rushing touchdowns through 5 weeks on top of the receiving and return game touch. I think he's got 27 touchdowns at least, if not more than that right now. He's just a threat in all 3 phases to find the end zone, has been phenomenal for the Skippers. And yeah, I saw him in the scrimmage, but if the scrimmage the day that he committed to Duke counts and is eligible for this, then Nate Shepherd is the guy for me.
Yeah, and let me just piggyback off that. From watching his first half highlights, this is someone who, first of all, he has pedigree. His older brother was a star receiver in the SEC at Vanderbilt, and now is doing the same at Colorado. Nate, we've talked about in the offseason, just being this 3-down running back that doesn't have to come off the field. He's capable of running inside, outside, and also being a really, really dangerous weapon out of the backfield as a pass catcher. He's been doing all of that at such a high clip. During his senior season, he plays with a really low center of gravity. He has really strong lower body strength, able to break through tacklers and run through tacklers. He's got great balance. I think the knock on him that people, maybe are hesitant to believe in him is because he's in a compact frame. But to me, as a running back, that's what you want out of a running back. You want them to be. It reminds me a lot of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, how he was built. He's got that acceleration, but he also has straight line speed. I love his versatility. I got to be honest with you. I don't see. We know that Frank Wilson was interested in Nate in the spring and maybe thought he was the 3rd or 4th best running back in the state. I don't know if we're going to make it to December and Nate doesn't land potentially an LSU offer.
Oh, folks
just a hunch.
Folks that are watching 27 minutes into this are really excited on the North Shore right now.
If you're a St. Tammany resident and you're now in minute 28 almost, listen, Frank Wilson trusts his evals as much as any coach in Louisiana, and I think he's just as good at evaluating talent as anyone. He, over the spring, obviously he went the course of offering Harlem Berry and James Simon, who I still believe are number 1 and number 2 in the state as far as we're talking about NFL prospects. And I think the conversation, he then offered JT Lindsay. Man, this running back group is so good. He's been in talks with Nate Shepherd. He's been in talks with Jasper Parker. He's been talking to Nate Shepherd. He nearly offered Nate in the spring, went toward JT Lindsay. JT, speaking of incredible senior seasons, we probably could have talked about JT as well. Nonetheless,
I just haven't seen him in person yet. I'll see him in a week or so.
You know what? I'm hoping to see a couple guys in December, but we got to give Nate his due, and he's our John Gruden grinder of the first half of the season. Sponsored by John Gruden, we could expect a check in the mail to St. Tammany Parish anytime now.
Yeah, Nate's been great. Chad Elsie Jr. was great when we saw him. Deshaun Ford was really good on Friday night against Zachary, despite Zachary being really stout on on defense. Jasper Parker was good. Jonah Gauthier from Acadiana, and so that list goes on. Ramon Singleton at Southside, but Nate has been phenomenal. Receiver, I think we might have seen a guy Saturday night that kind of takes that cake for me. Do you have someone that you look at as the top receiver performance you've seen in Louisiana thus far?
I've been really impressed with. We already spoke about him. But Raekwon Williams, he's, I think in that 2027 class in Louisiana, we're talking about live evals, of course. I just think that I think the world of him. I thought he completely grabbed my attention week one of the season against 35, which, by the way, has a really stellar secondary with some really tough players. And Raekwon is a sophomore, and diced them up for a couple of touchdowns, a couple of really athletic plays on the football. I think he's got game breaking ability. I love what we saw from him, not only as a receiver in this game, as the number one receiver at St. Aug there in this past one, but also on special teams. You mentioned it earlier. He's slippery. He's dynamic in space. He can run through tackles, and I think he can work on multiple levels of the field. I just think he's a really versatile, high upside receiver. And as this 2027 class, we talk about it, the quarterbacks at the top. There's an offensive lineman up in Lake Charles that really has caught my eye. And now, Raekwon and Miguel Whitley, his teammate, are two of the receivers next to tight end Ahmad Hudson that are kind of, I'm making sure I said it right, making sure I had the right last name, that are beginning to stand out. And I always say this, you never have to worry about that sophomore class. They're going to present themselves to you sooner rather than later.
I'd kind of written down Dejan's performance from Saturday. Raekwon was great both times that I saw him. Miguel's been really good. I mean, Manchild was really good this past weekend, but Dejan really impressed me, particularly as a guy that has not come with that same level of recruiting profile thus far, but is clearly a big playmaker. And on weeks that I haven't seen him, I still see the highlights popping out of some really game-changing plays for the Cougars early on this season. Offensive lineman, throw one my way who has maybe stood out from your times visiting Louisiana thus far this season, or let me know if you want me to go first.
You can go first. I'll give you a name in a second. I haven't seen him live, but
I wrote down a couple names, and the one I put at the top of my list, 2 times seeing Catholic High, Irv Smith, the Louisiana Tech commit, has been nasty and seemed to be involved on a lot of their pivotal plays, getting in front of whichever one of those running backs the Bears are riding at that particular moment, as well as when I watched him in the rain, that opener against Destrehan, had a chance to get into the end zone for a 2-point conversion where they gave the big man the rock and let him run down across the goal line. And to watch him and the energy with which he leads that Bears offensive line group, that is a strength for this team. He's someone that has really impressed me, especially having had a chance to see him now, one of the couple of teams I've had a chance to see twice early this season. He's been impressive both times.
Well, here's a name I wrote down during LSU camp, but then we missed all the one-on-ones because we were outside, which is a lesson I still never learn. But Albert Simeon out of Lake Charles at Sam Houston, he's picked up an LSU offer. He's having a breakout sophomore year. Who would have thunk? Brad Davis saw something in the freshman from Lake Charles out in the sticks, and now he is turning into a mauler. I'm not sure if he's an offensive tackle or he'll just, kind of develop as a guard. But as a run blocker, he gets to the second level with ease. He's nasty. He's very physical. He'll maul you over. And then in pass protection, he plays with that same tenacity, that same physicality, and throws a very mean initial punch. Really impressed by the 2027, who is now a 4-star on Rivals, Albert Simeon.
He was a big part of why Sam Houston versus Lafayette last Thursday night was one of my options, that eventually JFK and John Ehret won that fan vote on the Louisiana versus All Y'all channel to pick where I went to. But he was someone that if I had ended up out in the 337, he was a big part of my excitement to potentially go to that game. Defensive line, you can go first if you want. It's another area where there's a good chance someone we saw Saturday factors in pretty heavily there.
Yeah, based on the games that I have been at in Louisiana, it'd be hard to say that Big Rich wasn't the best defensive lineman I've seen so far. I thought I did get a chance to watch him work out at LSU camp, and the way he was moving around for Bo Davis and Brian Kelly. Again, this is a 300+ pounder that shouldn't be able to move that easily. at that weight, and seeing that now yield itself onto the field, collapsing the pocket, be able to provide an interior pass rush, just really athletic, really agile for a 300 plus pound interior defensive lineman. Really impressed by Big Rich. It's just his junior season. But I think now is the clear cut number one defensive lineman in the state for 2026. And in that conversation as best defensive lineman for regardless of class in the state.
How are we doing defensive line linebacker? So do you have a preference? Are we split like doing interior and edge rushers and linebacker, like, or are we just saying
I
defensive
think
line
at
group,
minute
linebacker group?
I think at minute 35, well, I think you can count edge as a defensive lineman.
Okay, I'll add Jaden Hippolyte from Southside, who was really good in the Madison prep game, just got to the quarterback early and often and really was a game changer for the Sharks that night. We've seen some other great ones. Corey Amos was good for Opelousas. Warren Roberts has been really good for St. Aug. Darius McKinley for Acadiana is bulked up and was a big-time playmaker in that win against St. Thomas More, but a guy that isn't necessarily the same recruiting recognition as some of those other guys, a tall, long kid off the edge for Southside that has been a difference maker for those guys in Jess Curtis's first season at the helm. Linebackers, who you got?
Yeah, I thought Warren Roberts was excellent, particularly week one. I don't know if you noticed, I felt like he wasn't on the field for parts of this game late. Maybe it was just me. He wasn't showing up on my tape, but his week one performance against MAC 35, I thought he almost single-handedly took away the McDonough 35 outside running game. He was able to pressure the quarterback. He's playing a little bit out of position, kind of on the edge for St. Aug, but he's going to be an off-ball linebacker for the Green Wave. I know that they think he is a freak over there uptown. He ran a 4.440 with a massive vertical jump during camp season. And he's an electric see-ball, get-ball linebacker. And when he is in his natural off-ball linebacker position, I think that in John Summerall's defense, they're going to let him run like the Tasmanian devil and go wild. And I love that in a linebacker. I think he's a super high IQ football player, great kid. I think the world of Warren. He's definitely a stock-up guy for me.
Yeah, that speed shows. I noticed even plays where he wasn't able to get there and actually make the tackle at some times against Edna Karr, that he was covering so much ground in pursuit downfield, across the field, whatever was going on. When he was out there, he always found his way to get pretty close to making the play, even if he didn't end up getting there, again, regardless of where it was on the field. Arsenio Bolds has been great to me in terms of the ground that he covers for that Edna Karr defense. He had the interception of a play that I think Aiden actually had a deflection on the ball, and Arsenio was able to kind of crouch down and save it from hitting the turf. But he's someone that is such a leader for that Cougars defense that he's played for from an underclassman and developed into a real vocal leader and communicator in the middle of it. He's someone that I'm looking forward to seeing where he finds his college home at the next level. He's had a few schools recruiting him and is someone that I think just having involved in your defense and involved in your locker room is a really nice piece that one of these colleges is going to have an opportunity to add.
Retweet.
Safeties, go ahead.
Blaine Bradford. I thought week one in the downpour, he was actually superb. And then getting a chance to also watch him move around at Catholic practice, some individual work, and also some team stuff. It's just more evidence to a theme that we've seen since OT7 and LSU camp. The way he's able to move on the back end, I think is better than most, especially at his size, at legit 6'2", 200 or so pounds. He moves at a different rate than everyone else. And that I'm not trying to differentiate him and Aiden, but those are two of the best safeties in the country. I think they're two of the top three, but I think Blaine is kind of putting himself in just rarefied air with the way he's able to move at that size, the amount of force he's able to impact ball carriers. He is an absolute enforcer over the middle of the field. But I love his ability to kind of help in a lot of different areas. I think that the way he tested this summer and what he's doing on the field, his mid-year highlight tape is absolutely filthy. For a safety, you love the dynamic ability. That I think he brings a game-breaking ability to kind of take over a game. We saw it in the state championship game. We've seen him just in big moments always step up, and I love that trade for a safety. I think that they're kind of a catalyst for a defense at times. Um, I think he's got a really strong case as a 5-star safety.
And I had him written down, obviously, in Aiden. I think those are the two, and you hit on all of it there. We talked about Aiden earlier. Shout out to a couple other guys I had written in my notes too. Keeman Thibodeau from Acadiana is really good for those guys, both pass coverage as well as kind of getting involved and mixing things up in the box. Speaking of which, Ron Strait Carter, who I saw in the scrimmage for Archbishop Shaw, has his mindset that he's going to go break school records for interceptions, but he is pretty nasty when they bring him off the edge as well. And Luke Green, a hard-hitting safety for Lafayette Christian, a guy that is a little bit under the radar, but has started to pick up some college attention, and he's going to be fun to watch these next couple of years as a 26 kid. Cornerbacks, as we wrap it up, go ahead and give me who you got, who you want to shout out here from the first half of the season.
Yeah, I was going to talk about Hayward. We kind of got a chance to talk about him and his length and just how seamlessly he moves in coverage, but I'm going to stick with the Dunham theme and go with Richard Montgomery.
Nice.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a name that, I don't know if he's going to play at the Power 4 level. I get definitely sense that there's interest because he's a very athletic, he moves extremely well. He's very physical, very disciplined cornerback, but he's someone that I definitely could see, Tulane or UL getting and being a great in-state gem for that next tier of corners. He had some really fantastic plays in that Ascension Catholic game. I like his anticipation. I like his closing speed. And I like his physicality when he attacks the ball in midair, and his willingness to tackle. Again, it's been a theme. If you want to separate yourself at corner, be willing to tackle, and not everyone is. And Richard certainly is. So I'll try to go outside the box there, Jarrett.
Yeah, love that. He's a great kid, a versatile player for the Dunham Tigers, and someone that I really do think folks are going to keep an eye on in that 26 class. There's a lot of other options. I have a lot of Lafayette guys pretty high on this list, and I will go ahead and give another shout out to a kid that needs a little bit more attention. Brian Broussard Jr. from St. Thomas More ends up with the touchdown for the Cougars in that game against Acadiana on a scoop and score fumble situation. He was intercepting passes at a ridiculous rate early in the season, and someone that has been kind of overlooked in the recruiting trail as sort of an undersized corner, but is super quick, super smart, always around the ball. And I think somebody, like a McNeese that he went and visited, someone like that should take a chance on this kid and really like the playmaking that he brings to the secondary. Can say similar things about Chris Elair at Lafayette Christian. He's rising up the Lafayette Christian ranks in terms of career interceptions. And so folks need to certainly take that pretty seriously when you consider the talent that's come through there. Dalen Lewis, big time lead cornerback for Acadiana, but give my nod for now to Brian Broussard, who's been fantastic.
Yeah, and also a shout out Jacoby Anderson, obviously at 35. I think one of the best under the radar DBs still on the board in Louisiana for smaller schools looking for safety or corner help. I think he would be a great option. And I think the runner up, I should have also given a shout out Ja'Kai Anderson. Absolutely filthy his week 1 against St. Aug. He's dynamic again in the punt return game as a kick returner. He's got fantastic body control, a great catch radius for a 2026 receiver, and he's just such a dynamic, explosive receiver. It can hit you in so many different parts of the field. Having a great junior season after a great sophomore season.
Of course, a little nod for Jacob Bradford too. We talked a little bit about Blaine. Yeah, Jacob has become one of the hottest names in Louisiana right now because everyone wants to know if and when he's flipping from Houston to LSU. But he's another big piece of that physical Catholic defense. He's a guy that can be a versatile defensive back prospect. He works out there at corner for the Bears and is, we talk about high school cornerbacks that it's impressive when they tackle. Jacob is not unlike Blaine in terms of the explosive hitting that he brings to the field for the Bears.
It runs in the family, something that they must hit each other on holidays. I don't know. It must get rough in the Bradford house. Also shout out 2027 running back Jaden Miles over at Catholic. Yeah. You saw him week 1 and we talked about it after the downpour game, but he just gets better with more touches. True downhill workhorse running back. See a little bit of Jasper Parker in his game. This that big frame runs downhill, but also a really good hands out of the backfield. The future of Catholic, very, very bright.
Yeah, before we ended up going 45 minutes on this, I had also written down potential superlatives of top offensive performer, defensive special teams, and underclassmen. And I had Jaden, the two St. Aug receivers we mentioned, and Marvin Joseph from Central as well, who we saw in the opener for the Wildcats, among some of those top 27 names that folks need to keep an eye on. But it is 45 minutes in. We have talked an awful lot about an awful lot of things. Sam, appreciate your time as always. Thanks to anyone who's still watching at this point. Just making sure who's
is anyone here?
Whose names get said down the stretch of this show. Looking forward to maybe getting one of those St. Aug shirts here sooner than later. But Sam, thanks again. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Rosa. This is Louisiana vs. Recruit Dat Boot. Until next time, y'all be well.